Anger is one of the most misunderstood emotions we experience. We often see it as something others cause, as if people or circumstances reach into our hearts and pull a lever, activating rage beyond our control. But the truth, while more confronting, is also far more freeing. Anger doesn't come from the outside. It arises from within. It is not a punishment, nor a personality flaw. It is a signal, a flare lit by the friction between desire and reality. In Buddhism, it's said that anger is born when expectation meets resistance. You wanted something to go a certain way, and it didn't. You expected someone to behave a certain way, and they didn't. You envisioned how life should unfold, and life, in its wild and untamed nature, refused to obey. That tension, that crash between the story in your mind and the truth of the moment is where anger takes root. But once you see this clearly, everything shifts. The emotion begins to lose its grip because you're no longer tricked by the illusion that someone out there is pulling your strings. You realize anger isn't about them. It's about your attachment to control, your identification with ego, your insistence that the world bend to your will. And this isn't a cause for shame. It's an invitation to awaken. Because true strength is not in suppressing anger or letting it explode unchecked. It's in witnessing it honestly, then responding wisely. The moment you can say, "This anger is mine," and so is the choice to hold it or let it go, you reclaim the power that anger tries to steal. You step out of the role of a reactor and into the role of a conscious being, grounded in awareness. What could be more powerful than that? Imagine no longer needing to win every argument, no longer needing the world to validate your preferences, no longer being held hostage by someone else's behavior. That's not apathy. That's liberation, because when you stop expecting the world to match your narrative, peace is no longer conditional. Anger, when seen with clear eyes, begins to dissolve. It softens. It reveals the hurt underneath, and even that begins to heal. So before we step further into the deeper teachings, let this truth take root in you. Every moment of irritation or fury is not a failure. It's an invitation, not to change the world, but to understand yourself more deeply. That is where the real transformation begins. That is where lasting peace is born. What is the true origin of anger? At first glance, it feels simple. Someone says something cruel, breaks a promise, disrespects us, and the fire rises. It seems obvious, even righteous. They caused this, and we're simply reacting. But beneath that surface reaction lies a deeper, more liberating truth. Anger is almost never just about the moment at hand. It doesn't truly arise from what was said or done. It comes from what we expected to happen, but didn't. Anger is born when our picture of how things should be is disrupted. We thought someone would act with care, and they didn't. We thought life would go a certain way, and it veered off course. That friction between our inner script and life's reality, that is where anger takes root. But look closer. Beneath every flare of anger is something softer, something more vulnerable, a hidden ache, a wound touched without warning. What we mistake for rage is often grief with armor. It's fear that's been forced to roar. It's shame that doesn't know where else to go. And when you begin to understand this, everything shifts. Long before modern psychology mapped emotional trauma, the Buddhists saw this clearly. Anger is a state rooted in delusion, not because it's imagined, but because we misread its origin. Anger isn't just about this moment, it's about the emotional thread it pulls. A comment that cuts deep may reopen a scar from childhood where you felt invisible, unworthy, or dismissed, and suddenly, that old pain floods the present, disguised as fury. When someone disrespects us, the part of us that reacts most fiercely is often the ego, rising up to defend the illusion that our worth depends on external validation. But here's the truth that frees us. Your worth is not in anyone else's hands. The belief that it is, that's what creates the suffering. And because that belief is yours, it can be questioned, healed, and released. Anger often emerges from trying to control what was never within our control, how others behave, how they speak, how they love or leave us. We want people to always understand, always care, always meet our unspoken needs, and when they don't, we feel wronged. But not all betrayal comes from others. Sometimes, the deepest betrayal is our refusal to accept life on its terms. We fall into the trap of should. They should have treated me better. They shouldn't have lied. They should have known what I needed. But reality doesn't speak in shoulds. It moves according to its own nature, not our expectations. And the more we resist this truth, the more anger accumulates. The greater the distance between what is and what we wanted, the more intense the emotional storm. That's why people sometimes erupt over something small. It's not about the spilled coffee or the missed call. It's about the quiet mountain of unhealed expectations behind it. And so, to truly understand and release anger, we must go inward, not to blame ourselves, but to liberate ourselves. Because anger, when met with clarity, becomes a doorway, not to control, but to freedom. Anger is not wrong. It's not a flaw to fix, a weakness to overcome, or a feeling to be ashamed of. It's simply part of being human. What matters isn't whether we feel anger, but how we meet it. The Buddhist path doesn't ask us to become numb or detached from our emotions. It asks us to become intimate with them, to turn toward them with compassionate awareness, and ask, what is this emotion showing me? What belief, fear, or old wound is it pointing to? When we stop treating anger as something to avoid, and instead treat it as a teacher, something beautiful begins to happen. We stop reacting unconsciously. We stop letting other people, or fleeting moments, hold the remote control to our peace. That's not passivity, that's power. That's mastery. Because real strength isn't found in shouting, slamming doors, or shutting down. It's found in the quiet, steady courage to sit in the heat of your own emotional fire without being consumed by it. To breathe through the trigger instead of becoming the trigger. In that space, you begin to realize something profound. You are not your anger, and just as importantly, you are not a victim of it. Anger is not who you are. It's a signal, a flare rising from deeper layers of your mind saying, look here, this part of you is asking to be seen. It may point to a boundary crossed, an old pain reopened, a truth suppressed for too long. And your job isn't to suppress that signal or to act on it recklessly. Your job is to witness it, to understand it, and to choose your next step from clarity rather than chaos. When you do that, when you pause, breathe, and respond instead of react, you reclaim something sacred, the ability to remain rooted in peace even when life's winds howl and bend the trees around you. Anger, in its rawest form, isn't the enemy. Ignorance of its roots is. But once you shine the light of awareness on it, even the fiercest fire softens. It no longer burns. It illuminates. It warms. It becomes a guide. And slowly, gently, it leads you back, not to control, not to perfection, but home, back to yourself, whole and awake. Have you ever looked back and wished you had stayed silent? Most of us have. In the heat of the moment, silence can feel like surrender, like letting someone get away with disrespect or walking away from a battle you could win. But if you look closely, you'll notice something quietly profound. While silence may sometimes leave you with questions, speaking in anger almost always leaves you with regret. In today's world, we're taught to clap back, to have the last word, to prove our strength through words that cut, but real strength doesn't shout. It doesn't chase validation through volume. True strength, as the Buddha and the sages knew, sits quietly behind stillness. Silence, in this light, is not weakness, it's wisdom held in restraint. It's the refusal to hand your peace over to a fleeting emotion. It's the mastery to pause when every part of you is ready to erupt. In the Buddhist tradition, silence is sacred. It is not the absence of power. It is power. It's the ground you stand on when your ego wants to leap into the fire. It's the space where awareness grows, where clarity emerges. Lao Tzu once said, "Silence is a source of great strength," and that truth hasn't aged a day. Because when you choose silence, not the kind born from fear, but the kind born from presence, you're not stepping away from the moment, you're stepping above it. You're creating space between what was done and how you respond. And in that space lives everything: discernment, dignity, and freedom. Anger hits the body first. Your pulse quickens. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts begin racing for the perfect line, the perfect defense. You feel hijacked by adrenaline, cornered by emotion. And in that storm, your mouth may move faster than your heart. Not because what you say is true or helpful, but because you want to release the fire inside you. But here's the quiet truth. The words we speak in anger are often the ones we replay in shame. That's why Buddhist wisdom teaches the power of the pause. You don't have to react in that first breath. You can wait. You can breathe. You can let silence carry the weight your anger wants to throw. In that pause, you reclaim your awareness. You loosen the grip of ego. You see the situation for what it is, not what it feels like in the moment of intensity. And here's the miracle: most of the time, when the moment passes and silence has done its work, you realize the offense wasn't worth the sacrifice of your peace. You see that responding might have fed your pride, but emptied your soul. This isn't passivity, it's power. It's the choice to remain rooted when the world around you wavers, and when you do speak. If you even need to, your words will carry the calm weight of truth, not the sharp edge of injury. Seneca once likened anger to a storm. It clouds the mind, rattles your balance, and makes enemies out of shadows. But like all storms, it passes. If you can remain still as it roars, if you can resist being swept up in someone else's emotional weather, you emerge not just untouched, but transformed, stronger, clearer, rooted in yourself. That is the power of silence. Not an escape from the moment, but a deeper entrance into it, one breath at a time. Imagine you're in the middle of a charged moment. Someone insults you, crosses a line, pokes at your pride, hoping to spark a reaction. Everything in you is ready to defend, to strike, to meet fire with fire. But instead, you pause. You don't retreat, but you also don't rise to meet their chaos. You hold your silence the way a monk holds a begging bowl, not as emptiness, but as a vessel of purpose and self-possession. And in that pause, something remarkable happens. Power, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself, returns to you. You feel it rising, not in your voice, but in your breath. Your calm begins to unnerve them. Your stillness doesn't feed their fire. It disorients it. Suddenly, you're not in their storm anymore. You become the stillness outside of it. Because silence isn't the absence of speech, it's the presence of awareness. It's the realization that not every battle is sacred. Not every wound is worth revisiting. Not every comment deserves your energy. Some insults are simply projections, born from someone else's pain. Some arguments are bait, dressed up as invitations. Some people aren't looking for understanding, they're just looking for someone to bleed with. And when you offer silence instead of fury, breath instead of reaction, you take back the only thing that was ever yours to begin with, your peace. That doesn't mean you never speak. It means you no longer speak from the wound. You speak when it's aligned, not just when it stings. You stop letting your pain choose your words. Instead, you learn the sacred art of timing. You respond when the waters have settled, when your voice can rise from clarity, not chaos. And that shift, that's not weakness, that's mastery. That's the quiet strength of someone who knows their energy is precious and won't waste it trying to convince the unwilling or battle the unaware. So the next time your anger flares, don't rush to release it. Let it rise. Witness it. Breathe into it. Wrap it in silence, not suppression, and let your stillness speak volumes. Because the one who stays grounded while others spiral, the one who doesn't react but chooses, is the one who holds the real power, not power over others. Power within, and that kind of power. That can't be taken, only cultivated, one pause at a time. When was the last time you genuinely laughed at something that once ignited your anger? Maybe it was a conversation you used to replay endlessly, stewing in resentment, or a small mistake that once felt like a monumental failure. Now, it barely stirs you. Maybe it even makes you smile. That shift from fury to freedom is a quiet kind of miracle. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't need to, because when it does come, it changes everything. Laughter, real, unforced laughter, isn't just about joy. It's a subtle, powerful sign of wisdom. It means you've stopped taking life so personally. You've stopped believing that every detour is a punishment. You've begun to see your problems not as enemies, but as passing weather, storms that come and go, but never define the sky. Life doesn't hand out pain with a grand design to spite you. It doesn't reserve peace for the pure or misfortune for the unworthy. It moves in its own rhythm, chaotic, beautiful, often absurd. And if we insist on greeting every difficulty with clenched fists and wounded pride, we wear ourselves down. We drain the very energy we need to heal, to grow, to move forward. But when we meet challenge with a breath of laughter, not the dismissive kind that denies, but the grounded kind that whispers, "I'm bigger than this," we reclaim our power. Laughter is not a betrayal of your pain. It's your nervous system saying, "I don't need to hold this so tightly anymore." It's the soul exhaling after carrying too much for too long. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "Perhaps I know best why it is man alone who laughs. He alone suffers so deeply that he had to invent laughter." There's something haunting and beautiful in that. Laughter is humanity's strange and sacred medicine. Only beings who know the weight of suffering could also know the lightness of release. It's no coincidence that some of the most insightful, spiritually awakened people are the ones who laugh the most. Not because they don't see the darkness, but because they've stopped mistaking it for the whole picture. The Buddhists understood this long before neuroscience gave language to nervous system regulation. They weren't dry scholars locked in silent caves. They were keen observers of life, of how we dramatize the minor, how we cling to our roles, how the ego inflates every inconvenience into a personal injury. So they taught detachment, not as cold indifference, but as gentle perspective. They taught the kind of humor that comes from clarity, not cruelty. A humor that sees the dance of life for what it is, impermanent, imperfect, sometimes wildly ridiculous, and always unfolding exactly as it must. Because once you realize you are not your thoughts, not your story, not even your latest struggle, everything becomes lighter, not meaningless, but no longer so heavy. You begin to laugh, not to avoid life, but to honor its paradoxes. Not because all is well, but because you're finally well within yourself. And in that laughter, your spirit stretches out, free, unburdened, alive. Imagine you're driving down a busy road and someone cuts you off, fast, reckless, without a second thought. That jolt of anger rises in your chest. It always does. But then instead of gripping the wheel tighter or shouting into the silence, you pause and you smile, not with sarcasm, not with superiority, but with understanding. You remember suddenly and completely, this isn't personal. Maybe they're rushing to an emergency, maybe they're having the worst day of their life, or maybe they're just like you on your less mindful days. Either way, why let one stranger's chaos rob you of your peace? That smile, soft and genuine, is not a reaction, it's a release. Think back to the jobs you didn't get, the relationships that ended abruptly, the plans that unraveled without warning. In the moment, each one felt like a loss, a door slammed shut, a dream denied. But in time, many of them revealed their quiet wisdom. You were redirected, not rejected. You found strength you didn't know you had. You stumbled into paths that, looking back, seem almost divinely placed. And now, when you remember those moments, you don't cry anymore, you smile. That's not detachment, that's growth, that's life, teaching you through time. Laughter, in this light, becomes more than a reaction. It becomes a spiritual practice, a conscious choice to carry lightness instead of weight. It's not denial, it's non-attachment in motion. It's the ability to see through the illusion that every slight needs a defense, that every setback is a punishment. When you laugh, not to dismiss the pain but to dissolve its grip, you reclaim something sacred, your inner stillness. And it doesn't just change you, it ripples outward. Your calm becomes medicine in a tense room. Your smile, quiet and real, becomes permission for others to soften too. You become the center of the storm, not by controlling it, but by refusing to spin with it. So the next time life serves you something absurd, an unexpected delay, a harsh comment, a plan falling apart, try this simple rebellion. Pause, breathe, smile, maybe even laugh. Not because everything is fine, but because you are fine. Because your peace no longer hinges on perfection. That's not naivety. That's power. That's the soul remembering its freedom. And maybe, just maybe, that's enlightened. Smiling back at you, not from a mountaintop or a meditation cushion, but from behind the wheel of your ordinary life. Sometimes, the most spiritual act isn't to outsmart the chaos or outlast the pain, it's to laugh gently at the absurdity, bow to the impermanence, and keep walking forward, light, free, unbothered. Focus on long-term victory. Ask yourself, have you ever walked away from an argument with the last word, only to feel like you lost something more important? Maybe you proved your point, maybe you silenced the other person, but somewhere inside, your peace slipped away. That lingering unrest isn't weakness, it's a quiet truth rising to the surface. Because when the ego takes the wheel and pride becomes the goal, we stop seeking understanding and start waging war for the sake of being right. And in doing so, we forget what actually matters. Buddhism teaches a different kind of strength. Not the strength that shouts, but the kind that walks away with grace. The strength to pause when provoked. To ask, is disturbing my inner stillness worth this temporary victory? That question can stop 1,000 storms. Because the deeper you go in your spiritual path, the more you realize not every fight deserves your energy. Not every jab requires a counterpunch. Some battles are just invitations to lose yourself in someone else's chaos, and you don't need to attend every war you're invited to. You can win the argument and lose your balance. You can defend your ego but betray your growth. You can dominate the conversation but walk away spiritually, smaller. True power, the kind the Buddha pointed to, and the kind Marcus Aurelius practiced in the fire of empire, is not found in control over others, but in control over yourself. You have power over your mind, Marcus wrote. Not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That's not passivity, that's command of the highest order. In moments of tension, it's easy to tell yourself you're fighting for justice, for dignity, for truth. But if you look more closely, you'll often find you're protecting a fragile identity, an old wound, a fear of being unseen or misunderstood. Conflict becomes a mirror, and what you see in it depends on the clarity of your mind. Will you see a threat that needs crushing, or a lesson that needs learning? Long-term victory isn't about winning today. It's about living in a way that preserves your wholeness tomorrow. It's walking away from arguments, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. It's choosing stillness over self-importance, and it's trusting that peace, not pride, is the real prize. So next time you're pulled into the fire of confrontation, pause, feel your breath. Ask yourself what truly needs protecting, your truth or your image, and then choose to respond in a way your future self will thank you for. That's not just maturity, that's mastery. Buddhism doesn't ask you to suppress your feelings. It asks you to see them clearly, to ask, what is this really about? Is it the comment, or is it my attachment to being right? Is it the tone they used, or is it my fear of being disrespected? These moments, examined rather than reacted to, become openings, not battlegrounds, because peace isn't passive. It's powerful. It's the quiet refusal to be pulled into emotional chaos just because someone else is spinning. Ask yourself honestly, how many arguments have ever brought you closer to someone? How many times have you left a fight feeling not just victorious, but fulfilled? Most people aren't debating to understand. They're defending their identity, and when you join them, you become reactive, pulled into a game where no one really wins. The Buddhist doesn't play that game. The Buddhist sees the big picture and asks better questions. Will this matter in 5 years? Will this person even remember what was said? And more importantly, what kind of person am I becoming through this? The truth is, every reaction is a vote for the future version of you. You can choose the one who needs to be loud, to be right, to be seen, or you can choose the one who is calm, deliberate, and unshaken. The one who knows the mission isn't to win moments, but to build a life. Think of those who inspire you most. Are they quick to explode? Do they let their emotions run unchecked? Or do they carry themselves with quiet confidence, with restraint, with clarity? That's not luck. That's not detachment. That's discipline. And it comes from making the hard choice to value peace over pride, to understand that some fires burn out faster when you don't add wood. Because sometimes, walking away isn't losing, it's leading. It's saying, I don't need this to define me. I'm building something bigger. That's a kind of wisdom the world may not always recognize, but your soul will. So next time conflict rises like a wave, don't rush to meet it with force. Pause, breathe. Ask, is this argument worth the person I'm trying to become? Zoom out, see the road ahead. See the person you want to be 5 years from now, calm, focused, unbothered, and let that vision lead you. Because in the end, the true victory isn't in being heard, it's in being whole. And sometimes, the greatest triumph is the one no one sees. The battle you didn't fight, the peace you didn't give away, and the quiet strength you chose to keep. Make not getting angry a mental challenge. What if staying calm became your personal sport, not something you hope for, not a passive trait you admire in others, but a discipline trained and sharpened every single day? We celebrate the person who runs at 5 a.m., poured, who grinds at work, who pushes their limits in the gym, but there's another kind of athlete. One who works in silence, whose battlefield is internal, the one who doesn't let their peace be hijacked by chaos. That's not soft. That's not passive. That's mental elite. Think of it this way, every moment you're tested is another rep, another chance to strengthen your emotional resilience. Someone disrespects you, that's your mental squat. Traffic is brutal, that's your emotional deadlift. A coworker takes credit for your work. Time for another calm, controlled rep. You start to see that the world isn't attacking you. It's training you, and that changes everything. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who lived through exile and slavery, put it perfectly. Any person capable of angering you becomes your master. Think about that. If someone can push your buttons, they own you. They don't even need to touch you. All they need is a word, a tone, a look, and you hand them your mood, your focus, your power. But the Buddhist, the Stoic, the truly disciplined soul, they train to break that link. They choose not to be puppets. they cut the strings. The moment you say, "Today I will not be mastered by my emotions," you reclaim your freedom. You wake up with a mission, not to control the world, but to control your response to it. Not to suppress how you feel, but to channel it with clarity. Anger arises. You see it, you name it, and you choose not to obey it. You don't let it drive the car. You place it in the passenger seat and keep your hands on the wheel. Make it a practice, a mental dojo. You're not just surviving the day, you're sharpening your mind. You start counting silent victories. The time you didn't snap, the argument you didn't take personally, the insult you didn't dignify with a reaction. And you feel stronger, not in a loud, aggressive way, but in a grounded, unshakable way, because real strength isn't loud. It's quiet. Calm under pressure is louder than any shout. And yes, it's hard, especially when people push your limits, when they're rude, manipulative, or just plain wrong. But that's the real test, isn't it? Anyone can stay calm when it's easy. The warrior is calm when it's justified to rage. That's where the transformation happens. That's when you level up. Start seeing every trigger as a sparring partner. It's not the enemy. It's the gym. It's there to sharpen you. And when you walk away with your dignity intact, when you choose silence over shouting, grace over reaction, that's not losing. That's mastery. That's power. Nobody can take that. So next time you feel yourself on the edge, pause, breathe, smile. Even if you can just say to yourself, "This is a rep, this is the work," and walk through the moment with clarity, not because you're passive, but because you're in control. Because emotional self-control isn't about becoming numb, it's about becoming free. And the person who is free, free from needing to be right, free from needing to explode, free from being ruled by emotion, is the most powerful person in any room. Train for that. Strive for that. Because that, above all, is the mark of a true inner athlete. Accept the reality of life and people. Why do we suffer so much from what people say and do? It's not always the words that cut deepest or even the actions. It's the gap between what happened and what we expected. We suffer not just because someone lied, but because we trusted them not to. Not just because someone judged us, but because we hoped they would understand. Not just because someone changed, but because we thought they wouldn't. That's the real sting. Our unmet expectations. We walk through life with a script in our minds, a script for how others should treat us, how friends should behave, how family should show up. And when reality breaks from that script, as it often does, we feel betrayed, frustrated, disillusioned. But the truth is, the pain isn't just from what they did, it's from what we believed they would do. This is where Buddhism steps in with a teaching that at first feels harsh, but later becomes freedom. Accept what is, not what you wish it to be. Because suffering multiplies when you resist reality. It's like gripping a rope that's being pulled. Your resistance is what causes the burn. Let go, and suddenly there's relief. The pain doesn't disappear completely, but it transforms from emotional chaos to quiet understanding, from frustration to clarity. Socrates once said, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle, and that includes the people who hurt you, the ones who disappointed you." Behind every frustrating action is a story you don't fully see, fears they can't name, wounds they haven't healed, awareness they haven't developed. This doesn't mean you tolerate abuse. It doesn't mean you ignore boundaries. It means you stop expecting people to show up with the wisdom they haven't yet earned. You stop basing your peace on how well others follow your script. You begin to see that people are who they are, not who you wish they would be. And there's a strange power in that realization. What happens when you accept that some people won't apologize, that they'll forget your kindness, twist your words, disappear when you need them most? At first, that idea feels like surrender, but if you stay with it, something shifts. you realize that accepting this truth doesn't make you bitter, it makes you free. Because the moment you stop needing others to behave a certain way for you to be okay, you reclaim your peace. You stop outsourcing your emotional stability to the ever-changing moods of others. This isn't giving up. This is growing up. You can't control if they thank you. You can't control if they respect your boundaries. You can't control if they love you the way you love them. But you can control whether or not you carry their behavior like a burden, whether you let their chaos enter your inner world, whether you let their words define your worth. That shift from control to acceptance isn't weakness. It's wisdom. You stop chasing closure. You stop rewriting the past. You stop hoping for people to become something they're not ready to be. Instead, you turn inward. You build peace that isn't dependent on anyone else showing up differently. This is what the Buddhist does. He sees life clearly, not through the lens of fantasy, but through the clarity of truth. He treats people with kindness, not because they've earned it, but because he has. He acts not out of reactivity, but out of alignment. Because his peace is not conditional, it is chosen. So ask yourself, where are you still fighting reality? Where are you still needing others to be different, so you can feel better? And what would happen if you stopped? You'd find something rare, not just relief, but resilience. Not just calm, but clarity. You discover your center, the part of you that doesn't flinch with the winds of other people's behavior. Because when you stop resisting what is, you begin to live with what truly matters: presence, power, and peace. And that is the beginning of real freedom. Don't take things personally. Ask yourself, how much pain in your life has come, not from what happened, but from the meaning you gave it, the unanswered message. The cold tone, the sideways glance, the betrayal that arrived without warning. It's so human to believe, this must be about me. Maybe you weren't good enough. Maybe you said too much. Or not enough. Maybe if you had only been different, softer, stronger, more lovable, this wouldn't have happened. And so, without even realizing it, you begin wearing someone else's behavior like it's your reflection. You carry their coldness like a mirror, their silence like a sentence. But here's the liberating truth. The Buddhist path whispers, most of what people do has nothing to do with you. Their moods, their reactions, their cruelty or distance, these are echoes of their inner world, their childhood wounds. Their beliefs, their stories you were never even a part of. You are a character in a story they started long before you showed up. And when you begin to understand that, life softens. The world quiets. You stop collecting arrows that were never meant for you. And even when they are aimed your way, you no longer let them pierce your peace. Don Miguel Ruiz said it simply, nothing others do is because of you. That's not an excuse for carelessness. It's a permission slip for freedom. You might show up with honesty and be called harsh, offer love and be called too much, speak truth and be silenced. This is not your failure. This is their filter. Taking things personally is the quickest way to make yourself a prisoner of other people's projections. One rude comment can hijack your whole day. One cold shoulder can undo your self-worth, but it doesn't have to, because your peace was never meant to be that fragile. You are not the center of everyone's universe, and paradoxically, that's what sets you free. Because it means you don't have to interpret everything as judgment. You don't have to shrink every time someone disapproves. You don't have to let a stranger's bad day define your value before you internalize. Pause. Ask yourself, what else could this mean? And then go deeper. Even if it was about me, does it have to define me? That's the pivot. That's the shift. That's Buddhist strength, being anchored in your own integrity. Regardless of how others wobble around you, you are responsible for what you say, what you do, how you love. You are not responsible for how it's received. So let others project if they must. Let the storm rage if it will. You don't need to catch every opinion tossed your way. You don't need to pick up every stone thrown. Some things are better left unclaimed, and as you learn this, your energy returns. Your peace deepens. You no longer bleed for misunderstandings. You simply return again and again to the clarity of your own center. Because not everything deserves your heart. Not every mood deserves a reaction, and not every moment requires a meaning. Some things are just weather. Let them pass. Anger never solves anything. Have you ever noticed how anger promises power, but leaves you feeling powerless? In the moment, it feels like fire. It rushes in, gives you a surge of energy, a sharp edge, a sense of control. But once the flames die down, what's left? Broken trust. Words you can't take back. Silence where there used to be connection. Anger might give you the illusion of strength, but it rarely builds anything lasting. It burns bridges instead of building them. Seneca warned us with painful clarity, anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured. That's the Buddhist view in one sentence. Anger doesn't just hurt others, it corrodes you. It lingers long after the argument ends. It replays the scene 100 times in your mind. It eats your peace, and the worst part, most of the time, it solves nothing. The person you yelled at didn't suddenly understand you better. The situation didn't change just because your voice got louder. The problem didn't disappear, it just got messier. So if anger doesn't solve things, why do we keep reaching for it? Because it's easy, it's instinct. It makes us feel like we're doing something when we feel helpless. But Buddhism is about choosing the harder, wiser path. The path that looks like stillness on the outside, but is full of inner control on the inside. It's about breaking the habit of reacting and starting the habit of reflecting. Ask yourself, the last time you got angry, what did it give you that calm couldn't have given you better? Was the outcome worth the tension in your chest, the broken connection, the self-blame that came after? Anger is natural, but mastery is intentional. The Buddhist doesn't pretend emotions don't exist. He simply refuses to be ruled by them. He sees anger not as power but as a test, a chance to practice stillness in motion, a moment to grow stronger, not louder. Think of the people who truly inspire you, the ones whose presence calms a room instead of igniting it. Are they easily provoked? Do they lash out at every offense? Or do they stay grounded, responding with clarity, not heat? That's who you become when you understand this lesson. Anger never builds, it only burns. So the next time anger rises, don't suppress it, disarm it, question it. Ask what it really wants. Ask what your peace is worth. And most of all, remember, no one can take your power unless you hand it over. In a moment of heat, choose calm. Every time you do, you build a life that doesn't collapse when tested. Let go of resentment and grudges. Why do we hold on to what hurts us? It's strange, isn't it? The way we carry pain like a badge. The way we replay betrayals like old songs. The way we speak of forgiveness, but still let certain names tighten our chest. We think holding on keeps us safe, as if remembering the wound will protect us from being hurt again. But in truth, it does the opposite. It traps us. It poisons the present with the bitterness of the past. Marcus Aurelius, with the quiet wisdom of a man who ruled an empire but still struggled with betrayal and loss, wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. In other words, don't become what broke you. Don't carry what tried to destroy you. Don't give your peace away to ghosts, because that's what resentment is, an anchor that keeps you tied to what happened, who hurt you, what they said, what they didn't say. And while they move on, maybe even forget, you're still there, reliving the moment, reopening the wound, rewriting a story that already ended. And for what? Resentment doesn't change the past. It doesn't punish the person who wronged you. It punishes you. It clouds your thoughts. It hardens your heart. It turns you into someone you never wanted to become, defensive, guarded, and emotionally tired all the time. But forgiveness, not for them, but for you, is different. That's strength in its purest form. To forgive doesn't mean you excuse the wrong. It means you refuse to let it own you anymore. You set yourself free. You say, "This hurt me, but it will not define me." Letting go of a grudge is not about forgetting. It's about choosing peace over poison. It's about releasing the burden you've been carrying. So long you've forgotten how heavy it is. And sometimes that release is quiet. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to tell them. You just stop letting the past hijack your future. Think of it like this. Your mind is a home. Resentment is an unwelcome guest that refuses to leave. It eats your energy. It fills your space with anger, and you have the right at any moment to open the door and say, "Not anymore." You're not doing it for them. You're doing it because your peace matters, because your future deserves more than echoes of old pain, because you've carried this long enough, and you're finally ready to put it down. So ask yourself, who or what am I still holding on to, and why? Then ask the deeper question, what would my life feel like if I finally let it go? Because that feeling, that lightness, that space, that freedom is available the moment you decide, I will no longer carry what doesn't serve my soul. Your role is to guide, not to control. Why do we feel responsible for how others behave? We say we just want the best for them, that we're trying to help, that we see what they can't see. But somewhere underneath that is control, a quiet, desperate need to shape outcomes, correct behavior, or fix people who never asked to be fixed. And that need, no matter how well-intentioned, becomes a source of constant tension. We try to control how someone talks to us, how they react, how they grow. We give advice not because they asked for it, but because we want to manage the risk of being hurt, disappointed, or misunderstood. But control is exhausting. And worse, it's ineffective, because people don't change when you push them. They change when they're ready. Your pressure won't awaken them. It will only push them further away. The Buddha understood this deeply. He taught, a leader is best when people barely know he exists. Real influence doesn't come from force. It comes from presence, from the quiet example of someone who lives what they believe, who embodies wisdom without preaching it, who shows the way without needing to be followed. Buddhism teaches us to let go of what we cannot control, other people's behavior, decisions, reactions. They've always been outside your control. What you can guide is yourself, your integrity, your clarity, your consistency. And in doing so, you become a mirror, one that reflects back what's possible, not what's demanded. Letting go of control doesn't mean giving up on people. It means giving up the illusion that your peace depends on them. It means stepping back without shutting down. It means choosing influence over interference. You support without suffocating. You speak without dictating. You love without needing to be obeyed. So the next time you feel that urge to correct, to lecture, to convince, pause. Ask, is this about them, or is this about my discomfort with uncertainty? And then remind yourself, my role is not to control. My role is to stay grounded, to act with wisdom, and to lead by being, not by forcing. Ironically, the less you try to control others, the more impact you have, because people don't remember what you demanded. They remember how they felt around you. Calm, seen, free, and that feeling, that's what opens hearts. That's what changes lives. Apply the ACD model to reframe how you interpret events. Awareness, control, direction. What if your emotional pain isn't coming from what happened, but from how you interpreted what happened? This is the turning point, the place where Buddhism moves from theory into transformation. Because most people believe their emotions are automatic, uncontrollable. Someone insults them, and they feel anger. Someone ignores them, and they feel rejection. Life goes off course, and they feel despair. But what if between what happens and how you feel, there's a space, and what you do in that space is everything. Carl Jung once wrote, "It all depends on how we look at things, and not how they are in themselves." That's the entire essence of the ACD model. Awareness, control, direction. When you apply it, you stop being a passive receiver of life's chaos and start becoming the conscious author of your experience. Awareness is the first step. You catch the moment your emotion begins to rise. Maybe it's tension in your chest, a tight jaw, or the story you start telling yourself, "They disrespected me. I'm not appreciated. This always happens to me." The moment you become aware, you create space to choose something different. Then comes control, not of the world, but of yourself. You can't stop people from being rude. You can't stop life from testing you, but you can control what lens you put on. You can challenge the automatic thought. What else could this mean? Am I projecting? Is this really personal? Or is it just familiar pain being triggered? Finally, direction. The ability to take that awareness and inner control and point it towards something productive. Instead of spiraling into anger, you redirect toward patience. Instead of collapsing into hurt, you direct it into clarity. Instead of punishing others, you use the moment to strengthen your boundaries, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. This is not denial, it's emotional alchemy. You take the raw material of experience, even the painful ones, and reshape them into wisdom, growth, calm. But it takes practice. It takes slowing down enough to notice your thoughts before they become actions. It takes humility to question your own perception. And most of all, it takes courage. The courage to stop blaming the world and start owning your power. Because once you apply the ACD model consistently, you no longer fear other people's moods. You no longer dread unexpected chaos. You face life with calm readiness, knowing that whatever happens outside, you've trained your mind to respond from the inside. And that shift, that's emotional freedom. That's what makes you unstoppable. Promote solution and compromise. What's more important to you, being right or being at peace? It's easy to get caught up in arguments, to dig in your heels to defend your position, your pride, your perspective. We all want to be understood. But here's the quiet truth. Most people miss. The more you fight to win every conflict, the more you lose the connection that actually matters. The Buddha didn't argue to dominate. He spoke to clarify. He didn't debate to destroy. He listened to understand because he knew something powerful. Anger separates, but wisdom builds bridges. The Buddha captured it simply: we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. That's not just a clever quote, it's a principle. Most people don't listen to understand, they listen to reload. They're not seeking common ground, they're preparing their next comeback. And in that state, nothing gets resolved, only egos grow, only tension builds. But what if, in your next conflict, you stepped back from the need to win, and instead asked, what outcome do I actually want here? Do I want connection, understanding, resolution? Then why argue like I'm preparing for war? Solution requires calm, compromise requires humility. It means being strong enough to say, maybe we're both right and both wrong. Maybe there's a third option we haven't seen yet. That doesn't mean you become passive. It means you stay open. You hold your truth without turning it into a weapon. The Buddhist seeks truth, not victory. They let go of petty arguments, not because they can't fight, but because their energy is too valuable to waste on what doesn't elevate. They understand that every disagreement is an opportunity to sharpen the mind, to strengthen the relationship, or to walk away in peace, not in pieces. Compromise doesn't mean you abandon your values. It means you find a path forward that honors the bigger picture. And sometimes, that path means saying, let's find a solution that works not just for me, but for us. Because when you choose solution over ego, something powerful happens. You stop burning bridges you'll later need. You stop creating silence where understanding could have grown. You stop punishing people for being imperfect, just like you. So the next time conflict arises, try this: breathe, listen longer, speak softer, ask better questions. Look for the outcome, not the knockout. And remember, your calm isn't just your protection, it's your leverage. Be aware of what happens in your body. What if your body knows you're angry before your mind even catches up? We often think emotions begin in the brain, with thoughts, stories, interpretations, but more often they begin in the body: a tightening in the chest, a clenching of the jaw, shallow breath, sweaty palms, knots in the stomach. These are not random, they're signals, alarms your body is trying to tell you something long before your mouth speaks or your mind reacts. Alan Watts said it beautifully: "The body does not lie," and Buddhism would agree. One of the keys to mastering anger is catching it before it becomes verbal, before it explodes, before it does damage. The truth is, your nervous system reacts faster than your conscious awareness. That moment when someone says something triggering, your body responds immediately. If you've trained yourself to ignore those signals, if you've been taught to suppress, distract, or numb, then you lose the chance to intervene. You lose the opportunity to pause, breathe, observe, and choose. That's what emotional mastery is. It's not pretending to feel nothing, it's noticing the feeling early enough to redirect it. It's sensing the surge and saying, "I know this pattern, I've seen this before. And this time, I will respond, not react." Your body is a compass. It tells you when you're stepping into old wounds. It tells you when boundaries are being crossed. It tells you when the inner child feels threatened. But only if you're listening, only if you slow down, only if you have the courage to feel what you've been trained to avoid. So start paying attention. The next time your heart rate rises, pause. The next time your fists clench, ask what you're holding on to. The next time your breath shortens, take one deep inhale and ask, what's really happening here? Because sometimes, a single breath between stimulus and reaction is the difference between damage and growth, between regret and maturity, between an old pattern and a new choice. Buddhism isn't about being detached from your body, it's about being deeply in tune with it. Use its wisdom as your early warning system, as your signal to ground yourself before the storm arrives. Train yourself to listen, not just to others, not just to thoughts, but to your nervous system, to the way your emotions rise, pulse, and move. Because your body remembers everything, even the things your mind tries to forget. And when you learn to listen without judgment, you learn to lead yourself through anything. Be selective with who deserves your attention. Why do we waste our peace on people who haven't earned our energy? There's a deep lesson. Buddhism understood one that most people never learn: not everyone deserves access to your emotional world. Not every opinion matters. Not every insult is worth responding to. Not every conflict deserves your participation. But the moment you start reacting to everything, you start losing yourself in things that don't matter. The Buddha gave this simple yet profound reminder: associate with people who are likely to improve you, not people who entertain you, not people who flatter you, but people who elevate you, who challenge you with respect, who speak with honesty, who bring you back to yourself, not away from it. Because every conversation you engage in, every response you give, every moment of attention you offer is a transaction. You're trading your time, your clarity, your emotional presence. So the question becomes, is this a worthy trade? The person who insults you online, do they deserve your reaction? The coworker who thrives on drama, do they deserve your inner peace? The stranger who cuts you off in traffic, do they really get to dictate your mood? When you react to everything, you're not defending your honor. You're handing your emotional power to people who haven't earned the right to influence you. Over time, this becomes a habit. You become a puppet, constantly pulled by the energy of others, constantly distracted, constantly depleted. But here's the alternative. Emotional selectivity, the conscious decision to choose your battles, and more importantly to choose your silences. Because sometimes, silence is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's saying, I don't need to fight every fire. I just need to stop fueling it. Being selective doesn't mean being cold or distant. It means valuing your focus. It means understanding that your attention is a precious resource, not something you hand out freely to every provocation. It means realizing that calm is your responsibility and chaos is a choice. So how do you start? You begin by observing, noticing the people, situations, and triggers that pull you into unnecessary emotional noise. And then you pause. You breathe. You ask, does this deserve me? And if the answer is no, you let it pass. You protect your peace the same way you protect your home, by setting boundaries, by not letting every stranger walk through your mind, by deciding what gets to stay and what needs to go. The result? You become grounded, centered, less reactive, more powerful. Because the person who controls where they place their attention controls their reality. Use gratitude as a tool against anger. What if the antidote to your anger isn't more control, but more appreciation? Anger thrives in a mind focused on what's missing, what's unfair, what should have been. It feeds on expectations unmet and outcomes undesired. But gratitude, true, practiced gratitude, shifts the entire frame. It turns your attention away from what went wrong and brings it back to what's still right. The Buddha, facing suffering, impermanence, and the illusions of desire, taught, don't hanker after what you don't have. Instead, fix your attention on the finest and best that you have, and imagine how much you'd long for these if they weren't in your possession. That's the Buddhist way. Not blind positivity, not forced smiles, but the discipline of appreciation. The power to focus on what remains, even when the storm rages. You see, anger clouds your vision. It narrows your awareness to one thing: the offense, the injustice, the disrespect. It creates a tunnel. But gratitude opens it. It reminds you, you are more than this moment. Life is more than this conflict. And the second you return to gratitude, something quiet shifts inside you. Not because the situation changes, but because you do. Try this next time anger rises. Pause and name 3 things you're grateful for, not to escape the moment, but to reclaim perspective. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's a friend who always shows up. Maybe it's the breath you're taking right now, the chance to reset instead of react. This simple shift turns anger into awareness, reaction into reflection. Here's the deeper truth. Anger often arises when we take things for granted, when we feel entitled, when we expect things to go our way. But gratitude humbles you. It brings you back to reality, not as punishment, but as clarity. There comes a moment in your journey, perhaps subtle, perhaps seismic, when the question shifts. You stop asking, why is this happening to me, and begin asking something deeper. What can I still learn here? Still value, still protect within myself, even now. That shift is everything. Because it marks the beginning of real transformation, not the kind that denies your anger, but the kind that gently redefines it. This is not about pretending the pain didn't hurt. It's about seeing it clearly, holding it tenderly, and saying, yes, this wound is real, but it is not all of me. Peace, the Buddha taught, is not found in the absence of conflict. It's born in the presence of perspective, and gratitude becomes the fastest path back to that perspective. Not the kind of gratitude that forces smiles through pain, but the kind that whispers, even here, even now, there is still something sacred within me that the world cannot touch. Let that become your reset button. Let it be your inner compass, your invisible armor. Because in a world constantly trying to hijack your emotions, stir your reactions, and bend your attention, the calmest person is not the one untouched by pain. It's the one who keeps choosing beauty, again and again, even while carrying it. And when you learn to do that, not occasionally, not by accident, but intentionally, consistently, your anger begins to lose its grip. Your spirit begins to rise, not hardened, but purified. You begin to see clearly what most never will, that your calm was never something the world could give you. It was something you were born with. It just got buried beneath the noise. Every angry reaction, every lost temper, every sharp word you've ever regretted, it all came from handing your power over to moments and people that never deserved to hold it. But that cycle ends now. Because once you stop just reading Buddhist wisdom and begin living it, with breath, with choice, with presence, you reclaim something sacred. You discover that peace isn't passivity. It isn't the silence of fear or retreat. It's the most profound kind of power, a power that doesn't need to shout, a power that doesn't flinch, a power that stands still even when the world spins wildly around it. You don't need to win every debate. You don't need to fix every misunderstanding. You don't need to explain yourself to those committed to misreading you. What you need, what the Buddha pointed to, is to master one simple, difficult, life-changing thing: the space between stimulus and response, that sacred pause where your entire future is shaped. That is where freedom lives. That is where the real you lives. And yes, you'll forget, you'll slip, you'll react. But that isn't failure. It's training. Every time you fall and return to your center, you deepen your mastery. Every moment of friction becomes another opportunity to flex spiritual discipline over emotional impulse. That's how the path is walked, not in perfection, but in persistence. So ask yourself now, as these words settle, who do I want to become? The one constantly pulled by the winds of the world, or the one who becomes the stillness that others anchor to? Because you weren't born to be ruled by anger, you were born to rise above it. And when you do, when you meet chaos with clarity and react, not with noise, but with wisdom, people will notice. But more importantly, you will. You'll feel it in the breath you no longer hold, in the words you no longer waste, in the moments you no longer lose. That sips the practice. That sips the path. And it begins right now, in stillness, in silence, in the unseen choices that shape your becoming. If these words gave you clarity, peace, or power, don't keep them to yourself. Share this with someone who needs it. Leave a comment below. Tell me which of these Buddhist truths you're ready to start embodying. This isn't just content. This is your compass and your peace. It has always been your responsibility. Now let it be your revolution.